Just to welcome, we went into a executive session at 6:25. We just need a couple minutes to vote to approve the Harwich Police Superior's contract for the upcoming years, and we so voted, and so that will take effect. And then we close the executive session. We'll now reopen our public session, and I ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Joe, I'll turn it to you for...
Nope.
Thank you, Don.
Yep.
I forgot to read the mandatory. As required by open meeting law, you are hereby informed that the town will be video and audio taping as well as broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience who plans to video or audio tape this meeting must notify the chairman prior to the start of the meeting. Is anyone so inclined? If not, we'll go to weekly briefing. And Joe, do you have an update on the...
I have somewhat of an update, Mr. Chairman. The construction schedule weekly update is the one dated submitted September 18th. I do believe there was a later version sent in, but it was not included in the packet. So I will read the 2-week and 3-week look ahead. So for the week of September 30 through October 4th, the mainline sewer crew number 1 will continue installation on Johannes Path. Mainline sewer crew number 2 continue installation on Route 137. Again, resulting in detours in that area. For the week of October 7th through October 11th, the mainline sewer crew number 1 continuing the installation on Johannes Path and continuing installation on Route 39, again necessitating a detour. And mainline sewer crew number 2 continue installation on Route 137, also necessitating detours.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Any questions or comments on this? It does seem proceeding okay. I know I'm driving around signs a lot now. Anyone else for weekly briefing? We have the two chiefs standing up here, so.
I beat him to the microphone, Mr. Chairman. You led the parade. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Dave Gilmet, Chief of Police. Just a brief announcement for our PD tonight, a little plug. As you might have noticed, or maybe you didn't, I don't know, the Deputy Chief and myself are wearing different color patches, pink patches. This is in support of Breast Cancer Awareness Month that starts tomorrow, October 1st. I'm very proud to say that some of our officers came forward this year, and we're very excited to participate in this program. It started out on the West Coast and came this way, and now there's some 74 police departments in Massachusetts alone participating in this Pink Patch project. And it's just basically to raise awareness for breast cancer, and some departments sell the patches. Our association, this is all going through our Harwich Police Association, which is a 501c3. So any funds donated or if they do end up selling the patches, I don't know if that decision's been made yet or not, Deb, but if they do end up selling the patches, it'll all be through the Harwich Police Association. And so you can go on their website or Facebook page and probably get more info on it. And there's also a full description of how the project started and a list of the participating departments on pinkpatchproject.com is a huge website that lists all the departments. So we're happy to be participating. I think it's a neat event that shows our support for the cause. And just as on a personal note, I lost my father to lymphoma when he was 64. So I don't think there's anybody out there that hasn't been touched in one way or another by this disease. So we're very happy to be supporting it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, my mom had breast cancer, so unfortunately a lot of us have been touched by that. So thanks for helping out on it.
Good evening, Board. I would like to just take the opportunity to thank my friend Dave Gilmet, Chief of Police, for this. It's real serious, and for the police department to take that initiative through his leadership, I just want to thank him. It's very important. Thanks, Dave. The other briefing I want to give you is, not only do we have a sewer system going in, but we're building a real nice firehouse out in East Harwich, if you haven't noticed. It's really nice. We're getting there. I think we're running a little behind, but we're certainly on budget. I'm hoping to come in under budget. I'm certainly a little frustrated that we're not quite there yet in time. I do think it's important, though, because the things have changed a little bit in that I get directions. The original contract called for the demolition of the present station. And then at one time, we talked about hanging on to that building, or at least hanging on to the property for the sewer project. That didn't seem to pan out either. I think I'm hearing from the folks in the community that, you know, maybe we ought to reconsider what we do with that building. But it's important for the board to kind of really have a understanding of what's going on out there, and to give me some firm direction, definitive direction, quickly, as to where you want to go as a board. So I'm requesting a follow-up to an email. I'm requesting that the board meet in formal session on site. You can take a quick look at the new building and certainly get a flavor of the property out there, the size of the piece of property out there, and what you want me to do as the manager of that new construction. What do you want me to do? So I'm formally requesting that the board consider a meeting there, and however you want to do it, I'll meet with you anytime you want. If you want to do it an hour or so before this meeting, that's fine. But I need some direction.
Okay. We can do that. We'll post it, and we'll get back and work on a schedule with and we'll meet on that.
Thank you. Any questions about what's going on out there, or why I'm here? No,
I presume you'll give us that, because you're right. We had an open space. We had some type of park discussion. We had as my understanding, we talked about using that building for storage.
Yep.
Use while we're doing the sewer work.
Yeah.
I know I've got people coming to me and say, well, how come you're tearing that building down? Can't you use it for some use?
I think you're going to find as
and
a
so
board,
I-
you're
we
going to
need
get some
more
interest
input
from the
from-
private sector as well.
We need some more input on that. I know some of those emails, Norm and Link is here, my only question on that, as I come back to it always, if the town's going to do work, it involves not only material, it involves labor. And, you know, we still want to go forward with what we decide, but I think we should account for all our effort going into that.
And we have.
And we talked about, and you have
Yep.
been doing that.
Yep,
Because otherwise, we
Link
lose
is,
out.
Link is very meticulous about that. We had the discussion about that project
Yeah.
prior to, and in the email I sent to you and the board, I
Right.
said, if you want an updated on that, I was looking for your directive. I don't have it yet, but I know Link's already done it.
And so I think, you know, what we'll do is do that, and then we'll put it on a formal, probably a follow-up formal agenda item here to have a more in-depth discussion. But I think that's a place where we can get a good feeling for what our options are. Michael?
Two things. Just to clarify, what's been done has been done, and we're not doing a lot more work out there until it comes back to the board, correct? That's the way I read the memo. We're not building a park right now.
No, we're not. No, not at all. No, what's happening there is some of those pine trees are simply a line of sight safety issue, and it was approved through planning and also administration. It's a line of sight issue.
And then the second, I think, how quickly would you like to see us out there? How quickly would you like this meeting? Because I'd like to establish a timeline now, rather than let 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks opening go
I wasn't
by.
going to wait that long. He said it
I
was
have-
urgent, so.
Yeah, I have a change order now to regrade and for a retaining wall in preparation for what you may or may not decide to do.
You could do that in the next couple of weeks, I think it'd be great.
Well, I think we'll try to do it sooner than that. I'll ask, Joe, let's ask Patty to send an email out, and we'll get some dates that, they'll at least get 4 of us there, because Steve, as you know, is in Germany with his granddaughter. But we'll get out as soon as we can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, Chief, what I'd be basically looking for rolling into that meeting is 2 things. It's like, one is what could the building possibly be used for, and the other one is what the ramifications are, because I think you mentioned the sidewalk segment. So just whatever it is that this causes, both on what do we need to do if we keep it, and what does it stop us from doing if we keep it.
I understand. I think by you visiting the site, you'll have a good feeling for what you as the board want to do and direct me to proceed. And I think it's great that there's interest in the building. I think that's wonderful.
Fantastic, yeah. Joe, if I can suggest, it might be good to have Charlene as well from the planning to be there. Give us an overview of if there's restrictions there. Okay? Thank you, Chief. Anyone else for a weekly briefing? Emily?
Hi, thank you. Emily Mitchell, Council on Aging Director. I just wanted to report that at the COA we had a fabulous week last week. On Tuesday we had a volunteer recognition barbecue. So it was a chance for us to thank our many volunteers who sustain the services that we provide. We have close to 100 volunteers. I know I've mentioned them before. We're immensely grateful for the work that they do. Probably about 40 made it out to the barbecue last week. We had a beautiful day. We got to eat outside. A big thanks to the Fire Association. They brought their grills over, prepared the food. A big thank you to the Friends of the Harwich Council on Aging. They purchased the food, so we were able to provide that to our volunteers. Thank you to the Chief and Deputy Chief of Police for coming by and spending that time with our volunteers. I know they appreciated having you there. So I just wanted to say thank you, and to Chairman Ballantyne was there as well, so thank you for that. It was a wonderful day, a wonderful opportunity. And then we ended the week with a dance on Friday night with the Sound Dunes Swing Ensemble. And we had over 80 people there, and people were dancing, eating, enjoying the music. We had a group of young people in their early 20s come by who'd heard about the event online. So it really reminded me of how special the community center is as an intergenerational space where we can have special events for seniors but really benefit our community as a whole. So it was a great place to be. I'll make sure that folks know about those dances in the future, and I hope you'll stop by. So, thank you.
I just want an honest input on this. Did the firemen, did they cook that on their own, or did Linda supervise them to get that done right?
We left them to their own devices, so, but
And
it all
they
turned
did
out
it,
well. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Mary Maslowski wearing a planning board hat tonight. Charlene Greenhalgh couldn't make it back to the meeting, and she wanted you folks to know that the Cape Cod Commission has agended the West Harwich District of Critical Planning Concern application for Thursday, October 3rd at 3 p.m. You each should have received this on your table. There was a map on the back that shows which meeting room it's in. It's actually at 3 p.m. in the old jailhouse. Charlene will be giving the presentation on the board's and town's behalf, and if any of you or members of the public wanted to go and show support, she would be thrilled to have anybody there.
Will that be recorded, do you know? Do they televise those?
I don't know whether
or-
they record their meetings. I suspect they do, but I can't swear to it.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the off chance that three of us go, I'd like to make sure it's posted.
It's my understanding it was posted this afternoon by the
Okay.
Administration Secretary.
Okay. Thank you, Mary.
You're very welcome.
Anyone else for Carolyn?
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out, police, fire, DPW, the water department. Touch a Truck was a huge success. We had well over 200 people come. And the ice cream truck, I'm sorry, was the favorite truck, so. Thank you.
No apologies necessary. Anyone else? If not, we'll move to the consent agenda. Who wants to take that on? Michael,
It doesn't, you want to do it, Don?
you want to do it?
I'm gonna hold C to start.
Okay. We'll hold C, and Don, can you?
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the consent agenda to approve the Caleb Chase Fund requesting the...
Oh, I'm sorry, Peg. You need to, we were,
You want to make the motion? Is it?
To what? To adjourn so we can go home? Yeah.
That's a little soon.
Anyways, Peggy Rose, acting director of the Harwich Historical Society still. So I would like to mention coming up this Saturday, which is the 5th, and then on October 19th, we'll be having our annual graveyard tours. We didn't ask Don this year because, you know, nobody could have topped his performance last year, so. But anyway.
Obed Brooks.
But anyways, if you would like to go on the tours, they are at 4, 4:30, and 5 o'clock. Please call the museum, 508-432-8089. Leave your name, your phone number, and what tour you would like to go on. And we'll call you back to confirm. And just one other thing, we are going to the Harwich Schools exhibit, which has been up all year. We're going to carry it over into next year as well. And so that means we are still looking for memorabilia when you went to school, class pictures, you know, any myriad of things that you have about the Harwich school system. We'd love to get them because we had a deadline last winter of, I think it was January 15th, to get the items to the museum. And then come April and May, and people were asking about what the exhibits were going to be, and they said, oh, I have something. You know, too late, too smart at that point, because the exhibit was going up. So if you were one of those people, get in touch with the museum, and we'll see what we can do.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you, Peggy. I'll ask again so I don't miss someone else. Anyone else for public comment? If not, then Don, we'll move back to the consent agenda.
Peg, is it okay if I do this? This time I really mean to move the consent agenda. The vote to approve the Caleb Chase Fund request in the amount of $800. Vote to ratify, well, we
did that.
We already did that, so that B is out. Vote to accept the resignation of Tom Caruso, Treasure Chest Chairperson, effective 12/2/19. That's a correction. Vote to accept the resignation of Megan Yapps, Noise Containment Committee, effective immediately. Vote to accept the resignation of Deborah Sementa from the Bylaw and Charter Review Committee, effective immediately. Vote to accept the resignation of Sandra Hall from the Bylaw and Charter Review Committee, effective immediately. Vote to accept the resignation of Anita Doucette from the Bylaw and Charter Review Committee, effective immediately. And vote to accept the resignation of Carol Thayer from the Bylaw Charter Review Committee, effective immediately.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Don?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into it, but I happened to be at the meeting where everybody resigned, and I would suggest that we look into why an entire committee basically resigned.
Good point. Anything else? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
And Michael, you asked to hold C, so I'll turn that to you.
Yeah, C was quite a lot longer of a consent agenda
Yeah, no,
item.
yeah.
So when you look at the contract, I guess this question is to Joe. It's a draft, so I'm not sure that I'm prepared to vote for a draft. But it does say under the comment line under number 10, town insurer should review. Has town insurance, the insurance company, reviewed this document yet?
Not to my knowledge. What the administrator informed me of this afternoon is that he had in the packet a sample agreement that was presented by Attorney Fair at KP Law. That's the extent of our discussion.
I'm going to vote no, which will make this not pass. So if you want to bring it back next week.
I want to table it and bring it back then, so we can, I don't think this is that time sensitive, and we can get it right. Okay? We'll move on then to public hearings and preservation, presentations. Joe and I think Carol, you're going to step in and walk us through this.
Yes, Carol Coppola, Finance Director. I'm here on behalf of the Town Administrator who had asked me to
Michael, yes.
provide this presentation for you. On an annual basis, the Finance Department and the Town Administrator put together a 5-year fiscal forecast, what we call that, that has uses of funding and then the sources of those funds, meaning how are we going to pay for all the money we're going to spend in the next 5 years. And so with that,
If I may now.
we were required to make some assumptions, and we make these types of...
Carol, Michael's going to interrupt and ask you one question as we go.
So Carol, just 2 questions before you get into the weeds on this. It says, first page, non-property tax under assumptions, 4% to 6% with an additional revenue of $225,000 for motel and hotel tax. So that's been figured into these numbers?
That's correct. I was instructed to do that.
Okay. So Larry, I would ask you, the board, we talked about this last year and it didn't pass. We've now gone 6 months, 8 months without bringing this back. And the assumptions in our 5-year projection that we're gonna give to the public right now assumes that we're gonna add 2%. That's number one. Number two, Carol, do you have under the debt, the $8 million bumble in East Harwich, the overage in the East Harwich wastewater that's gonna go back before town meeting this year?
I do.
That's in there. And do we have the proposed number for DHY if that passes in the 5-year plan as well?
I do.
Okay.
Don, then we'll let you go. We'll
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is basically a warning shot because it's in here and the calculations are being made on the basis is not about you. I'm telling you just for myself, hell could freeze over before we go from 4% to 6% on that rooms tax unless that 2% is earmarked in some way, shape, or form to reduce the debt burden for the sewer system. And I say that because the management board for the county that has a whole different rooms tax involved with it, they go around the table every time we meet, and there isn't a single community that did accept this that hasn't either set up a stabilization fund for the sewer borrowings or earmarked it towards something like that. It doesn't belong in an operating expense. It just doesn't. First of all, we haven't approved it, neither is town meeting. It's kind of a gamble to show up at town meeting where your assumption for the budget is something you haven't even approved.
Thank you, Don. Carol, we're not letting you get started, but I have some questions as well, but I'd like to treat this as a draft budget presentation and give us a chance to come back and maybe discuss some of the assumptions going forward.
Okay.
So I would like you to proceed because it still is a great starting point.
Okay, so you want me to proceed?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so there are some assumptions we've made, and some of them are the ones that have been already brought up this evening. There are some other assumptions that we've made with regard to revenues as well, and those are non-property tax revenues. We've made the assumption that $400,000, an estimated $400,000, is going to come in under short-term rental tax, and that's a big assumption that we've made. We haven't made very many other changes with regard to revenues in this model. We have not factored in any kind of overrides or anything of that matter. We're typically using FY19 financial results and then moving forward with those results. So here are the source of the funds that we have anticipated in moving forward in the next 5 years. And next, we get to the area of how are we going to use those funds? What are we going to use them for? Well, we have some union contracts that have been settled, and those union contracts have been settled at greater amounts than previous years. And so I've factored into the actual amount, whether it's a 6% increase for the first 2 years, and then factored in additional funds for the outlying 3 years, especially when I knew exactly what those dollar amounts were going to be. For general expenses, I like to look at the FY19 actual results and then look at exceptions. What are exceptions? Well, exceptions would be the town clerk in November of 2020 is going to have an election, and that's going to cost some money. So that's an example of an exception. Our property and liability insurance has been increasing quite significantly in my mind. And so we've got some properties that Maya is revaluing. For example, this past year, Maya revalued the elementary school and the cultural center, and those values doubled. So the premium's going to double for those buildings. So we factored in costs for that as well. We factored in a 3% increase for the next 2 years for health insurance, and then we get back to a normal, what we consider somewhat of a normal increase of 8% in the years thereafter. And then we've got some modest increases in legal expenses. And then, of course, you know that we look to the board to confirm your commitment to funding OPEB. And so OPEB, the commitment to fund OPEB increases on an annual basis. The commitment to fund sewer has increased too on an annual basis based on these assumptions that we've made. When we talk about the schools, we have to estimate increases for the schools. We estimate at 3.25%. We're looking at level funding enrollment. So there's an enrollment number that comes out October 1st, and that is what the state uses as a, I guess, certified enrollment number. And that is what your 3-year rolling average would be based off of, those numbers. So we had to make some assumptions that they're going to stay relatively level. As you are aware, FY20 is the first year that the Cape Cod Regional Technical High School bond, the debt payment, is coming into play. That first year debt payment is a little over $908,000. It drops in the second year to, I think, about $735,000, and then drops thereafter. For Monomoy Regional School District, Monomoy has debt. That debt is associated with the high school. The middle school was paid off last fiscal year. We've increased the operating budget by 3.25% again as well. That's our assumption, and we're keeping that assumption for the next 5 years. In addition to that, the school district anticipates roofing projects. They believe that those roofing projects will happen somewhere in the year 22 or 23, and so I've included in anticipated debt payments for those projects as well. So here's a whole bunch of numbers. So this is the top half, which is what we're calling the source of the funds. How are we going to raise all of those funds? We're going to raise them in real estate and personal property, which is right up on that top line that says levy limit. There's a calculation that goes into those numbers. It's a calculation that is pretty much standardized for all communities in the Commonwealth. We have local receipts, and what are your local receipts? Those can be your building permits. Those can be your tipping fees, beach stickers, things of that nature. Those are all your local receipts, motor vehicles as well. And then we have some state aid funding. And then we've increased our overlay surplus. And the reason why we've increased our overlay surplus, and what that is it's more or less an allowance for abatements. We've seen the balance of that allowance increase significantly over the past few years. So it's at somewhere around $1.2 million that we're holding and setting aside for abatements. So we believe that we need to really increase what gets given back to the town at the end of the fiscal year. So we've jumped that up $100,000. I haven't estimated free cash in here at all. So the only free cash line that you're going to see here is FY20. I don't know what free cash will be available, and so it's very difficult for me to actually put a number in there that we can rely on. And then what's in the category that's called transfers in or other financing sources, we have some departmental budgets that are offset by other special revenue funds that we transfer in as a revenue source every year. And so that would be the cable, Channel 18, and emergency management as well. The rest of these, or most of these items here are debt. And so that debt is being paid for by Harbor, by Golf, by other departments, in addition to betterments that are being paid for by property tax owners. And then finally, we have indirect costs for the water department. So indirect costs for the water department can be the town administrator's time, the time in the treasurer's office takes to process receipts and to reconcile all of the cash, the time that it takes in the finance office to work on all of the water financial transactions. In addition to that, it's health insurance and unemployment insurance and workers' comp and things of that nature. So that's what goes into water indirect costs. And those are kind of a standard formula that we use. The last area that I wanted to point out were CPA funds. Those are land bank debt service. So there was land that was purchased that was financed with bonds, and those bonds will be paid off in 2024. And so we transfer money in from CPA funds every year to cover those bonds. So some people like to see charts, so I provided you with a simple chart here with different colors that you really can't see, and I apologize for that, and lots of little tiny numbers, but it's just a summary of what I showed you before. And this is real estate and personal property, and this is what you would be raising over the next 5 years if you were to use this forecast that was prepared. And so now, how are you, and there's lots of numbers here, and how are you going to use the funds? What are you going to spend them on? The town's operating budget is made up of all the different departments with their salaries and their benefits and their expenses of each department. It has all the debt service that is under the jurisdiction of the town. And then school department costs that were part of the assumption as well. We have insurances, various insurances, property and liability that I talked a little bit about before, health insurance for all the employees in Harwich, in addition to other benefits. So you see the numbers on the bottom here should be the net sources and usage. You should probably want to say, why are some of them negative, right? Because based on these assumptions, we're saying we're not going to have enough revenue to be able to meet all these expenses. And it gets worse and worse and worse in the outlying years. Now, is this not typical of what you see when we present this to you? It's pretty typical. But is it realistic? No, it's not. That would mean that in FY22, you need an override if you're going to go with this plan. And that's probably not going to be palatable for you. So I think that this plan can be useful, and just for you to see in outlying years when you're making decisions about, they can be decisions about contracts, multi-year contracts, or just decisions of what you want to see Harwich, where you want to see Harwich financially in the future. I think it's important to look out 5 or 6 years, or even 10 years. It's not unusual to do that. And then I just have a couple more charts that you probably can't see here, so I'm sorry, with some little tiny numbers, but it's just a summary of what you saw before. And there's your projected surplus and deficit, and what's in red is your deficits, and they're pretty significant dollars because you can see these are in millions and millions of dollars, this chart. Okay. What can I answer for questions?
Thank you, Carol. Looks like we have some work to do on this. I have some notes that I think maybe, Don, you mentioned one number, or some of you did. Some of the assumptions are a little scary in the sense we haven't moved on. One was moving the meals and tax from 4 to 6%, whether we actually do that. The short-term rentals, as you point out, is also problematic, since I guess sometime maybe the end of next October we'll get some information from what happened this year in collection, because right now we have no idea what that, how many people rented, how honest they were, all the things that work into that. So as I said, I think this is a draft that we need to work on. Carol, one thing that caught my eye was that when you made a presentation to our non-resident people earlier, you pointed out that we had about a 7% increase in our budget from last year to this year, 2018 to 2000, and that was a $65 million budget, is I think what you presented. This is a $69 million budget, which, if my math is okay, that's actually about an 8% increase going into this year. And I don't see how we do that, quite frankly, after all these years of doing it. So we're going to have to go back and see what options we have and give some hard discussions on it, at least my opinion. And I appreciate your help putting all this together, but I think we have a little bit of work. Don?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Another assumption that I'm a little troubled by, in looking back, I don't know that you'd have these numbers at your fingertips, but last year I asked for them about what the last 4 or 5 years of free cash were. But it's substantial. It's a large number. And I get that there are things that we need to do, like vehicles or whatever, but at the head of that line, I would like to see OPEB coming from that, because free cash was not designed to be like a massive under-your-mattress fund. It's designed as a cushion. So, and if 1 year is big, if 2 years is big, but when you start going 3, 4, 5 years and it's still big, then you're basically programming free cash. While I don't want to toy with our solvency, something that's really critical like OPEB should wind up being at the front of that particular line.
I agree.
Okay, Michael, you have any other?
Thank you, Carol, for all the work you did on this. I'm going to spare you with my million questions because the town administrator is not here, and you've started the conversation with you were instructed to put something in there, so I'm going to reserve it for when he's here. But, you know, I think I've said it before, and I'll say it again, the public really needs to pay attention. If you look at that negative number in the out years, and based on our assumptions at 3.5% roughly, our budgets haven't been 3.5% in 5 years or longer. But the 5 years I've been paying attention, we're 6 to 8%. And we do have a $2.5 million to $3.9 million free cash every year as well that we go shopping with. So there's a lot of things that aren't in this forecast, and I can't help but think you were instructed to put other things in here as well. So I'll wait till Chris is here.
We have some work because, you know, we have people we have services to provide as well. So how we get this matched, but it'll be a good discussion. Thank you very much, Carol.
Welcome.
And, you know, Joe, what we'll do on the agenda is we'll bring this back for some more discussion points. I think it'll take some multiple discussions.
Understood.
Moving on next to new business, then we have annual meetings from the board, from boards, and the first one is a Harwich Cultural Council.
Good evening. I'm Tina Games, Chair of the Harwich Cultural Council, and you have received our report in your packet. So I just wanted to touch on a few things. The first question that you had was about agendas and minutes.
Yeah.
They're always posted timely from this council. I post them myself. I send them to Caleb, and he posts them, but I make sure he gets them. All of our members have been sworn in, and ethics training has been done. And I'll just note real quickly that we have a very new council. I'm the veteran, and Roseanne Shapiro joins me as a veteran. She's only into it 3 years now. But we have new members. We're a very new council this year. We have 2 members with us tonight. Dinah Lane and Charles Barnes were recently appointed. And they join Chris Banks, Kathy Tian, and Lorinda Raquel. So a very, very new council. But just for the listening audience, just wanted to share that the Harwich Cultural Council is a town-appointed committee with a goal to enrich the cultural lives of our citizens. We are one of 329 local councils who are charged with allocating grant funds for community-based programs, projects, and events that serve the arts, humanities, and interpretive sciences. So we have a fun job. And our council, we have a maximum of 9 members, and we currently have 7 right now. So we do have 2 vacancies. So next time you're interviewing, and hopefully anybody watching this, we would love to have you on our council. I want to note that we did have 3 people come off in the spring, and I just want to take a moment to recognize them. Roseanne Clark was on the council for 9 years, really served us well, and she has stepped off. Shay Mitchell was on for 6 years and recently stepped off, and Joan Cicchetti for 4 years. So I want to recognize those 3 ladies for their service to the Cultural Council. And one of the unique things to know about the Cultural Council is we can only serve for 6 years. So just 2 terms, and then we have to come off. And if we want to come back, we have to wait a year and be reappointed. For fiscal year 2019, we received a total of 25 grant applications totaling $24,018. And then we go through a standardized review process, which we're getting ready to go into soon. We awarded $9,000 in local grants. And these local grants are really important to a lot of our local artists and nonprofit groups because $100, $500, $750 really can make or break a project or a program that's really super and serves our Harwich residents. So these are very, very important grants. I want to share with you that for the 2nd year, we held a grants information session in August at the Harwich Cultural Center, and we actually had a really good turnout. So we're reaching into the community and making sure people know that we're there and what the grants program is about, and we had about a dozen people come this year and about the same last year. So that's something new that we're doing. And also want to share too that I think everybody knows about the Cultural Compact Agreement. What you might not know is that we were renewed. So the state, I think everybody in the Cultural Compacts across the Commonwealth, and again, we were the only town selected for that, we're doing such good work that they invited us to renew for another year. So, and along with that renewal came a $5,000 grant that came to the town. It was a matching grant, so we were able to match that with the help of Cindy Williams and Charlene, kind of taking a look at maybe where we could use that money. So I think it was applied over at the Cultural Center. So $5,000 did come in. And the Harwich Cultural Council also took part in the ribbon cutting ceremony at Saquatucket Harbor on May 4th. And I was very privileged to speak on behalf of the Harwich Cultural Council. That was a very exciting day. And the council also conducted a community cultural needs assessment. We're required to do this every 3 years by the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and we did that back in February and March. Just to kind of get a feel for, you know, what are we doing right? What could we be doing differently? We want to hear from the public about maybe where some of the needs are culturally that maybe we're not meeting, that we could be meeting. I know that serving our disability community came up, so we're kind of looking for those types of opportunities. And just 2 other things I want to highlight. The Harwich Cultural Council will continue to partner with the Town of Harwich and the Harwich Chamber of Commerce toward the Cultural District designation. I think a lot of us know about that. We're working on designation for Harwich Port and Harwich Center, so we'll continue to work on that. And also, the Harwich Cultural Council is currently exploring fundraising opportunities and working on a collaborative project with the art department at Monomoy Regional High School. So a lot of our young artists are going to be featured really soon for a fundraising project, and the funds for that will go back into our grant program. So that is the highlights for this year. Any questions?
You've been busy. Can you share the results of the needs survey?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I can,
interesting, I
yep,
think,
I can
to,
do that. And I will send that, and we can put that, yeah, online, or, yeah, however you want to do that, yes.
And just interest, what % of the grants go to the students?
It's, okay, we typically, for the students, usually Monomoy Regional, or no, actually somewhere in one of the art programs or performing arts programs or the music programs, they typically will filter through one of those departments. So as far as a percentage, I can tell you that we typically give anywhere from about 4 to 6 grants toward the youth.
Okay.
And well, and let me just say it's not only the school-age children, but the preschool. We actually have 2 preschools pretty much every year that come forth with a grant application. So we do have 2 preschools. So looking at the youth from, I guess, age 2 up to the high school. So within that framework, we probably get about a half a dozen grant applications, and we typically fund all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a biased question. I'm hoping you're supporting the schools on the arts program.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
Just a comment, if I may.
Comment?
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been a very busy year. You guys
Yes.
have made a lot of press, so
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Don?
Ditto, I appreciate all your efforts. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And let me also publicly recognize Carolyn and Erica, who've been really instrumental too. We now meet at the Cultural Center. It's going to be our second year meeting there, and that has really given us a lot of visibility and opportunities to kind of partner with artists and, you know, over there. So that's very, very exciting. So we're very, very happy to be meeting over there. One other thing I forgot, we're currently going into our next grant cycle, so FY20. We have an application process open right now. The deadline is October 15th. So for anybody listening, watching on Channel 18, if you're interested in applying for one of our grants for FY20, the deadline is October 15th. You can go either to the Harwich Town website, go to the Cultural Council page and click on the application link. It will take you there. Or you could go to the mass-culture.org/Harwich and find the application there. So if
Sounds
you're
like our
listening, 2
website's
more
easier.
weeks. What'd you
Sounds
say?
like our website's easier, but
Yes, exactly. So yeah, just go to the town website and go to the Harwich Cultural Council page. But you have 2 more weeks, so if anybody's listening, watching that wants to apply for a grant, you got 2 more weeks.
okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Next on the agenda is the Brooks Academy Museum Commission, and Mr. Spitz.
Hello, everyone. David Spitz, Chair of BAMC. I don't think you do have the written report in your packet,
we don't.
because if I email it this morning, that doesn't usually work well enough. So here you go. Blame it on my preferred volunteer status these days. Last December, BIA Studios, an architectural firm from Boston, completed its assessment of the Brooks Museum structure, and it presented recommendations for building restoration and improvements. I don't think all of this information is new, but I'm going to go through it all in one concise report tonight. The report is available online at the BAMC webpage on the Town of Harwich website. The architect's first recommendation was not accepted by our commission, which was excavation of a full basement under the entire footprint of the museum, including some basically just crawl space. That was a wish list item. It came in at, in the vicinity of $2 million, and we didn't think it was conscientious at this time to go forward with that amount. Oh, and I also should mention there are 2 of us here tonight. I think you know Peggy Rose. So, instead, the final recommendations that we accepted focused on 3 items that we had requested. Creation of a climate-controlled storage area in the existing basement area. So rather than a couple thousand square feet, we got closer to 500 square feet. But it still would be a great improvement over what's there now. Installation of a low-impact, low-use called Lula elevator to improve accessibility for the basement, 1st and 2nd floors, rather than the residential chairlift that currently goes between the 1st and 2nd floors and is rarely used. And 3rd, and this is the one that actually interests me the most, is relocation of the main building entrance to its historic location on the north side of the building under the columns. So on the basis of those 3 recommendations, last fall we applied to CPC. Actually, we applied while it was still only in draft form because we didn't have the final report then. We applied for $130,000 to begin work on this project. Concerns were raised at first by the town administration and then backed up by the CPC that the visual structural analysis done by the architects was not sufficient. The town wanted to know correctly, more carefully, whether the structural condition is adequate to support the proposed basement renovation and elevator installation. So CPC approved our full request for $130,000, but it stipulated the first step would have to be the structural engineering analysis, and that would have to be completed before we did anything else. Right after town meeting, to try to get that moving quickly in advance of the next round of CPC, I met with the town engineer who had just been hired, who found out pretty quickly that he was rather busy. So between his workload and completing town priorities, we have not been able to move on this as quickly as BAMC had hoped. However, in my further conversations with Joe and with Griffin Ryder, we now understand that the process is due to begin this fall. I haven't checked in the last few weeks to make sure we're still moving, but that's what I'm stating publicly is my hope. A second noticeable restoration issue that is very visible is the condition of building siding, particularly on the east side. The architects identified an internal mechanical issue. It's an air handler situation that I will not be able to describe well if you ask questions about it, as one possible cause of deteriorating conditions on that side. A subsequent visual analysis by the town engineer and by the building maintenance supervisor, I never know what Sean's exact title is, say they're not sure that the architect was right about that analysis, but in any case, we do need to look further to why is the paint peeling more on that side, which is where everybody drives by, than on any of the other three sides. In any case, it is now likely that the entire building, I should also mention that Sean Libby's staff has tested the peeling paint areas. There is significant lead paint there, surprise, surprise. We're now telling you we think that the entire building should be scraped and repainted to remove all lead paint. The experience from the library is that that is not cheap. Under the CPC approved article, this issue is supposed to be addressed after the structural analysis is complete and prior to the wish list of the 3 improvements that we want to see. So it's going to take a while to get all this done. We want to proceed in stages. We intend to seek funding from both the local Community Preservation Committee, and we've identified state and or federal, mostly state, historic, cultural, and accessibility grants that might be able to help us out. Those grants are very competitive, but we're going to try. Okay, moving on. This summer, the Kroll Barn, I'm told, was the only town building that had significant storm damage, and even that wasn't too much. A tree fell on the roof, hit the chimney, and that was a good thing, because it saved the roof. And I want to state publicly, we appreciate, even though we gave them a hard time during the process, we appreciate the efforts by the town buildings maintenance staff in dealing with the insurance company and doing all the chimney work, the roof reshingling, and other minor repairs, and it was all done in a very timely fashion. I don't know if they've got the broken window pane fixed, but other than that, everything has now been done. During this time, it became clear that BAMC has no direct responsibility for the Kroll Barn. We sort of assumed it was part of the museum, but we don't have anything official from you guys or from anyone to say that we're really responsible for that oversight. And we are now requesting that the Board of Selectmen grant the same official oversight capacity for the Kroll Barn as BAMC now has for Brooks Museum. Our membership is full. With the recent appointment of Janet Cassidy as our newest member, we have gotten a quorum for all scheduled meetings during the year, and that's my report to you.
Thank you, David. Any questions or comments for David?
Just normal, thank you very much. Thanks for all the time you put into it.
Don?
Also, thank you, but in order for us to be able to deal with the Kroll Barn, it would have to be agended, so that's something for the future.
I'm not asking.
I've got a note on it to bring it back.
Action
on that.
tonight.
Yeah. Thanks again, David.
Okay.
Nice job. Next on the agenda is the Bylaw and Charter Review Committee. I want to table that for the time being. As you know, we have several have resigned, and I think I'll bring that back as we look on direction going forward. And so that will come sometime in the future. Town Administrator's Report.
You got one more under
One more?
New business.
If I could read, and this is the important one, right? This is a vote to support Deacon's Folly Road land acquisition. Is that's not correct. It's a Cherokee.
B.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
That's under new business.
Yeah, I don't, I see, I'm sorry. Votes to support application for funds by coal applicants, Real Estate and Open Space Committee and Conservation Committee for potential acquisition of 0 Cherokee Road. Sorry, Elaine, do you wish to speak to this?
No, unless you have a question.
Are there, Don?
I'd like to move that we concur with the submission, that we support it.
Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Okay. Michael? Oh, excuse me, Don, you want, I'll
Yeah.
let you go first.
Yeah, for the motion, I just want to clarify that as far as this Community Preservation Committee goes, this doesn't mean that we're submitting it. They're asking
Our support.
for our support on projects to determine whether we actually support something or whether they're going it alone.
And to that, I did get an email today from Amy from Conservation Commission, and she is unable to be here, but Conservation Commission voted their support of this as well, is my understanding. So, Michael?
I have nothing.
And Al?
Joe answered it. Joe's all.
Joe, did you have something?
No, Mr. Chairman, you covered it. I was just going to mention about Conservation Commission.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is anyone in the audience care to comment? If not, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
This passed unanimous, Joe, and thank you for your work on this, Elaine. And okay, next item is under contracts. Solid waste presentation by Mike Camara, President of New Bedford Waste Support. And Link, are you going to introduce this, or? Is that okay, Joe? We'll have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lynn Cooper, DPW Director. Some of you may recall, some of you probably weren't sitting here at the time, back in 2013 and 14, our contract, our 25-year contract with Cavanta was expiring. The Cape Cod Commission did some RFPs and some work on behalf of the Cape Cod towns, which were known as the Tier 1 towns that were the financial mechanism that got that waste-to-energy plant that we know as CMAS constructed. Back in 2013 and 14, Cavanta had approached the communities, and they were throwing some very large numbers at us, what they wanted. To put this into perspective, so we get to 2013-14, Mike Camara, the owner of New Bedford Waste, ABC Disposal, stepped in and gave some proposals. He came and presented that proposals to this board along with other boards, and about half the community signed with ABC, about half of them signed with Cavanta, was my understanding. Back prior to January 1st, 2015, we were paying $37.51 per ton, and that included change in law provisions that was in that contract. Today, we're faced with stuff in the $80 to $90 range. And there's a lot of turmoil going on in the industry. The state just released its 10-year master plan for comment. I think there was an article in the paper this weekend about it. And Mr. Camara would like to inform the board of some of the trials and tribulations facing the solid waste industry. We have a 5-year contract with him that expires this December 31st, and we were planning or positioning to hopefully have a renewal with the contract. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Camara.
Okay, thank you, Link.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, good evening. Mike Camara, CEO of ABC Disposal, Bedford Waste Services, and Zero Waste Solutions, and part owner of those companies with my wonderful family. I have here tonight my General Manager, Jerry Dugan, and I want to start off by apologizing for last Monday. We didn't make it down here. We had some folks come in from out of town discussing this issue of waste, looking at removing quite a bit of waste from our facilities. And they came in late. We got tied up in some serious discussions and quite frankly lost track of time. So I want to start by apologizing for that. Moving forward, going the right direction here? Yep. There we go. Going to go back in time, if you look at 20 years ago, unfortunately, the state implemented bans on expansion of waste-to-energy facilities. And of course, their goal was to create more recycling. They put waste bans in place, as you all know, and we all started recycling. At the same time, they were discouraging the increase or expansion of landfills, and so that was difficult for, folks that were in that business to get permits. Recycling was the focus, and they thought that if we recycled more, we could, reduce disposal. Unfortunately, we're going to get into discussions on why that wasn't a good idea. The state of the master plan back in 2000, similar to what they're coming out with now, that they're coming out with the 2020 master plan, but they had the goal of recycling 46%, and actually it was 46% to 50%. If you look at the rate right now, it's around 23%. And that's because of China's national soil, which we'll talk about in a minute, and a lot of other factors that have changed the marketplace dramatically.
Before you leave that, what's their goal now? Is it still 46% recycling, or did they increase it?
They set a goal of 50% by the year 2050, which it might be unrealistic, but they haven't reached any of their goals. So, they put these goals out, but it never really happens. Oh, I'm corrected. 90% by 2050.
90%.
Good luck. So we felt we had a very good business plan for zero waste solutions, and obviously I'm going to get into why that's all changed. Our goal at Zero Waste was to obviously handle recycling materials and MSW, and also take what was left over and turn it into a fuel briquette. Many communities out there in the marketplace were improving their recycling programs. They changed to single stream recycling, which increased the recycling rates. Many communities adopted pay-as-you-throw. That increased the recycling rates. Although I got to tell you, pay-as-you-throw is tough because people a lot of times put the wrong things in those bags, and it seems to increase the contamination rate. So we created a process with our facility that would handle all these materials, and we had a very aggressive goal of the 90% that the state's talking about now. So what's happened, what's changed? Let's go through that. In 2017, China decided it didn't want to import recycled material anymore. And why did that happen? January 2017, President Xi, President of China, seen a horrific video. He's seen men, women, and children burning plastics to see what kind of plastic it was. He's seen horrific conditions in factories, people breathing toxic fumes in factories. He's seen folks with the materials they couldn't recycle that came into the country, take them and throw those items, discard those items in rivers and streams, or take it and burn it outside their facilities. He's seen toxic smoke from these things that were burning going through crops and affecting animals, going through the fields where animals are grazing. And he said, that's it. We're going to put the environment first instead of money first. That's why they decided to put a very strict contamination level of 0.5%, pretty much saying that we don't want it anymore. And their goal is to be self-sufficient and not take in recyclables from around the world. Prior to this happening, they took in 55% of the world's recyclables. In fact, from the U.S., they used to take 4,500 containers, big, large cargo containers a day, just from the U.S. alone. So what we've seen because of this is a steady decline in commodity pricing. They're at 25-year lows. If you look at, all the recycling items, including fiber, which had a great value years ago, the value is very, very low right now. If you look at cardboard, again, 160 per ton. We've seen it high as up in the 300s back in 15 years ago, down to $30 a ton. There's no local glass outlet anymore, unless it's source separated at a drop-off site. No outlet for MRF glass. That's in a material recycling facility. The only outlet we had was the iDog plant in Milford, Mass. It closed down this past May. No other outlet for that material. And so that obviously, instead of either getting rid of it for nothing or getting paid a small amount of money for that glass, we got to pay a regular disposal fee on that glass. Because of China coming out of the marketplace, it's also made it more difficult to move commodities around the country. Countries that are now taking recyclables are Turkey, Pakistan, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand. Here's my concern. If China was doing a terrible job with the environment, with taking those recyclables, do we think those other countries are doing a better job? Are we recycling, with so much effort only to contaminate other countries? Just a thought, just my own thought.
Mike, to that point, I read an article recently that, if my memory is correct, the U.S. recycles about 8% of our glass, whereas in Europe, it's more up around 20%. And so there's something different in how they must have a source. I don't know what's going on exactly, but it's a significant difference. And the point being that of all the things you've mentioned, glass is probably the easiest to recycle. I mean, to do something with.
Right.
It was a chemical magazine, okay, but I mean, it was the easiest thing to deal with. And so I don't know what's happening there, but it's
On that
It's a
point, we are applying for a grant from the state to take the MRF glass we bring in and recycle it. Put in some separation equipment and possibly turn that glass into an aggregate product to use in construction, in drainage, as well as a product for sandblasting. So we are making that effort to see if we can't get that grant. We're putting in the applications going in this week. But if you look at our model assumptions for when we started this project, and left side showing where the pricing was and where it is now, the only bright spot is obviously HDPE Clear that has had a bump. Everything else obviously has gone down, and in some cases, very significantly down, which has made it so very difficult to recycle this material. We wanted to obviously make a fuel briquette. We had letters of intent for many biomass plants in New Hampshire, and unfortunately, the state's changed the way they look at alternative fuels. They took out all renewable energy credits. Those facilities would be happy to buy our fuel briquettes only if they could get the renewable energy credits. What we recently learned is it's even gotten worse in New Hampshire. They've taken away the RECs, if you will, away from all the biomass plants. So we're hearing now that all those biomass plants are going to shut down, putting several hundred people out of work, which is horrible. With that, we had no, end outlet for the briquettes. So our whole line C, a whole chunk of our revenue stream went away, unfortunately. The disposal outlets and options and the loss in the state is really devastating. I'm going to show you a slide that when I look at it, it bothers me that we've got to this point where we've lost so much capacity. But as I stated earlier, we are in negotiations with several organizations to move bale waste out of the state. We are currently working with a company that's taking bale waste from us and taking it out to Pennsylvania, Ohio. Also looking at markets out in Michigan as well. So this is the slide that really bothers me. If you look at, we're not far off of 2 million tons of disposal capacity that we've lost since 2014. And it started, we lost a very big landfill in the city of Fall River, obviously with a substantial amount of tonnage. But if you look, year after year, a landfill is not infinite. It's finite. You have a certain amount of airspace, as you know, in your local community landfill. Once you fill it up, it's gone. So that's all disposal capacity we'll never get back again. Next slide, please. So this year is a tough year for southeastern Mass. If you look at the fact that we're losing about 300,000 tons in January. We're losing the Taunton landfill in January. The CMW landfill is where CMAS takes its ash. The landowner they were buying land from is not going to sell them any more land. And they were bypassing about 120,000 tons of trash into that landfill a year. So combined, we've got a significant loss of capacity right here in our backyard. Now, you look at the waste energy plants in the state. They're all well over 30 years old, many are over 40 years old. As they get older, they're going to break down more. That's very frightening because, you know, when they had a hiccup, they had an outage, you had all these landfills with a safety valve where they could take the waste. The safety valve is gone. What I fear is that we're going to have one of these major plants be out for a couple of months, no place to go with the trash. I promise you, you will see trash somewhere in the state sitting at the curb, and a lot of people are very upset because they didn't get picked up. We all know that, you know, we put it out the curb, we want to come home and see it gone. I can't imagine what's going to happen when that doesn't happen, and the frustration of the people that put that trash out there and expected to get it picked up. Transfer stations, they're not end disposal. The transfer stations that we run several, once the building's full, it's full. If you have nowhere to go, that's it. We're working hard to make sure that we can commit to our customers that there are solutions. And that's why we had that meeting last Monday. We've had many since, on the phone today with folks regarding, you know, end disposal and outlets out of state for the trash. Can't rely on it being in state unless, you know, the DEP decides to lift the moratorium on waste energy or look at other alternatives which we could explore. You know, one of the things...
Excuse me, Mike, is there any discussion on lifting the moratorium on waste energy?
They're willing to allow 350,000 tons of new capacity if it's an alternative technology and it doesn't have any burning to it. So if there's a company that has a good technology that can do something different, like gasification, which is very, very expensive. There was a company that had an interest in coming in here out of Canada, and it fizzled out recently. But it's been out there for the last, they had actually had that in the last master plan back in 2010, and no one's took them up on it. So the chances of it, you know, happening, in my opinion, are not very favorable. And so, you know, here's the other issue. You know, because of their policies, I'm not trying to pick on DEP. They've made some mistakes. And so every citizen, every business owner in the state's affected. It's driven the cost up, unfortunately, because of these mistakes. And it was to the point where we have some of the highest disposal costs in the state, and it's going to get worse, unfortunately. So please feel free to write to the governor, the Secretary of Environmental Affairs, the Commissioner of the DEP, and voice your concerns about where we're going in this state, please.
Well, as you know more than I, the gasification is a very high energy process, and so they're...
Yes, it is. I mean, it's very efficient, but
worried about climate change. I mean, there are two opposite forces to get that done, unfortunately.
Right. It's a very expensive operation. Yeah. And it still has a residue. Where's the spot for the residue to go? You know, I guess they can rail trash out.
I think the obvious question is there anything we can do locally to help our cause? I think, Link, you've told us in the past we're actually are doing quite well compared at least to our neighbors in percent recycling. Not correct, or I'll pick on you.
Back a few years ago, DEP stopped giving the report card. My last recollection of filling a report card, they stopped that, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. And Harwich we used to receive honors. They'd put a report out, and the newspapers would grab a hold of it. And I think the number was somewhere like high 30s, low 40%, something like that. But DEP abandoned that. We still submit all that information, required annual reports to the state. They just don't issue us a report.
Okay, thank you, Link.
Here's the other thing that I'm concerned about is in the future, because of lack of disposal outlets in the state, we're going to be relying on a lot of other states to take our waste. Because of interstate transportation laws, they can't stop it. But I can tell you in Ohio, they've had a lot of problems with odors at landfills. They've been massive fines issued to landfill operators out there. Is it possible that they say, because it's an environmental issue, we don't want Massachusetts waste anymore? it could happen. And what do we all do? I just think it's unfair that in this state, we're not creating the opportunities to have the outlets we need to handle our own waste. Having to, rely on other states to take our waste, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I guess the other thing is, as we rely on these other states, where's the pricing going to go? I know the state's relying heavily on rail facilities. There's one trying to open up in Holbrook, another one trying to open up going to be opening up soon in Holyoke, one in Leominster, and one out in Springfield. I happened to run into the gentleman that's working on opening the one out in Leominster recently. And I said, how's it going? He said, we're planning to open up in May. I still haven't found a home for the waste that I'd be taking in there. So that's frustrating. The state's looking at that capacity as a capacity that solves our problems. Well, if he's having trouble moving that waste, then the problem's not solved. We have to deal with it. So just threw up some solutions. One would be to have the state lift that moratorium on waste energy plants. And here's the issue. When you look at designing, financing, permitting, and constructing a facility like that, that's a big undertaking, and it doesn't happen overnight. And then, of course, who wants it in their backyard? Would NIMBY be an issue, and it doesn't happen? The solutions have to happen, but they're behind the 8 ball. They've let themselves fall behind the 8 ball, thinking that we'd be able to recycle our way out of this. Allow for some expansions. There's a landfill right now in Fitchburg. Proponent wants to buy some state land. Buy the state land and buy similar land and donate it back to the state. That needs to happen. There's a 1,700 ton per day landfill that we go to every day now, and come January, we can't go there anymore because they're running out of space. They need to be proactive and help us in creating these outlets. Are there old landfills that have extra land that they could develop and open? I think the state needs to look at identifying those sites, working with the communities to look at the possibility of them running it, or a third party coming in and running those sites and opening it up. It could bring in host fees to a community and provide valuable, landfill capacity for our state's waste. Rhode Island has a state-run landfill. Should the state be considering going out and buying some land and opening up a state-run landfill? A nationwide ban or statewide ban on food waste would be a good thing. Right now, that's banned if you generate a ton a week. They're proposing for 2021 half ton a week. Go out there right now and say, look, come 2021 or 2022, it's banned 100%. It's 20 to 30% of the waste stream. Let's get out of the waste stream now, not wait. We have a crisis here. If we reduce that volume, it's going to help us out a lot out in the future. At Zero Waste, we still plan to recycle, even though it's a difficult marketplace. We're in the process of putting a baler in. It should be operational in a couple of months. And the only solution that's available right now in this marketplace is baling waste and sending it out of state. What our goal is to make sure that we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. We're looking at having multiple facilities or multiple sites, multiple contracts, so that we're not worried about where it's going to go, that we have secure outlets. Fortunately, we're doing it now at a smaller scale. It's going to ramp up quite a bit by the end of the year. And it seems as the trucks that deliver freight into Massachusetts are the trucks that are taking the waste out. And it seems like more freight's coming into the state than going out, so there's a lot of trucks available to move this waste. And so that's a benefit. I look at rail, and we currently use a rail site out in Brockton for difficult to manage materials, and quite often they call us up and they didn't get rail cars today or tomorrow or sometimes for a week. That's not reliable. I know the state's looking at rail as a real possibility of expansion, but when they can't get the rail cars, there's only 2 bridges out of this area, and if there's an issue with one of those bridges, it becomes a disaster. Not only that, raw goods take the precedent over trash. And so they only allow so many cars in a rail line that's going out of the area. And if they reach that capacity with raw materials or finished goods, then the trash stays behind. That doesn't help us. Next slide, please. So what are we looking at the future? Obviously, increased tipping fees. It's unfortunate. We're working on disposal outlets. You know, what we look at is you know, we need to be around, because if not, there's not many alternatives. And the least alternatives there are, the higher the cost is going to be. So our goal is to make sure that we're here to help support the communities and work solutions that, and provide them with, you know, responsible solutions so their waste can keep moving. One thing to think about is, you know, why wait for the state? The town could implement a town-wide ban on food waste. You know, I often thought about, you know, we're working on doing this on a commercial side with our customers. They make a biodegradable bag. Residents are going to put their food waste in these bags, take it to the drop-off area. You can mix it with your compost. They break down very nicely. Again, we're looking at this, and we're talking to a lot of our commercial customers. We have several thousand of them, about, you know, not waiting for the state to make a final ban on this. We need to work now to save disposal capacity. Let's put the food waste to good use and turn it into a compost material. That's it. I'm ready
Thank
to
you, Mike.
answer your questions. I know it's disturbing
Well,
news about what's going on, and I don't
Is
like
that-
coming out and talking about it, but it is a difficult situation.
It is,
I
yeah.
can tell you, we are working hard to fix it.
And it's mostly negative, so unfortunately.
Sorry about that.
Any questions or comments? Michael?
Just wow. You know, I think Link, obviously, this is in the front of your mind, and I think that this conversation warrants a much longer conversation with Link
Yeah.
on what we're gonna do as a town. And just one quick question, Link, would be, what percentage of the trash that we're hauling away actually comes from the town of Harwich versus commercial haulers that are bringing it in from someplace else? And how do we regulate that if we were to change that?
Right now, the answer is 100% is Harwich residents. I've had to curtail the first week in September all commercial business, and they've had to go to the town of Yarmouth transfer station, which is run by Cavanta. We got through the summer. You know, I've been in this industry for 28 years. I started at the disposal area. I worked 15 years there. Pretty familiar with it. I've never seen conditions like this. When this first happened, I think it was Jerry that called me, his operations manager, and says, I got to cut you back. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just make a few phone calls. I was like, there's no capacity. I called DEP. And I said, what are you going to do? Where can I go? He made some few phone calls. I couldn't get people to call me back. And to put it in perspective, we're moving 10, 11,000 tons a year. He's got 250,000 tons he's trying to move. So if they're not talking to Mr. Camara, they're certainly not talking to the town of Harwich. So we got through the summer by doing business with Dan Barrett in the town of Bourne. He had a little bit of extra capacity. He allowed us 5 loads through the summer, which was mainly able to help out some of the commercial haulers, which, you know, if it's just your opening question was what percentage. I'm going to guess probably 60 or 70% of it comes from Harwich. You have a good commercial clientele in this town. And I figure by just going like this, a lot of other towns have just got rid of the commercial side of the business, and the prices go up for them. And I didn't see that serving those businesses or the businesses that rely on them that reside in Harwich. So we got through the summer by paying more, but going to town of Bourne. And basically, we're splitting it half under Mike's contract with Cavanta and half to the town of Bourne. They told me they had to curtail it for ash. In Mike's presentation, I think he said 80% of their capacity is already sold to Cavanta, and the other 20% is to the town of Falmouth and their own trash. So yes, I've never seen it like this. I'm very concerned for the future and what we're going to do, and it's very unfortunate the circumstances here. I'd like to end by saying Mr. Camara, if he was not in back in 2013, 14, or to date, he has saved us, what, $7 a ton was their best, 58 to 65, $350,000 over Cavanta's best offer to date. It's not helping us now, but I mean, that was real savings that we received by Mike stepping into the mix back then.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Link.
Just want to add that what we're proposing tonight, I think you're at $59 a ton, raising it to $65 a ton tomorrow, so with a short notice. And then we're probably going to be in the low 80s for the first of the year. I don't have that number right now because I want to make sure it's a solid number, and hoping to have a contract signed soon with a couple of different locations, and this way I can commit and support the town, because obviously you need a home for trash. At the same time, once we add the baler at Zero Waste, it's been ordered. I have a meeting on Wednesday with the folks that are going to install it to come up with, find out when they plan to come in and install it. We'll have the capacity to increase inbound tonnage at this facility and then be able to, support the town as far as their commercial waste is concerned.
Question I have is, when does our contract expire now, our current contract?
Our contract expires December 31st. There was a clause in the contract that we had to notify New Bedford Waste by October 1 of our intent to renew or not, which started these discussions 6 weeks ago or so forth. And I believe Mr. Camara, I don't want to speak for him, but I believe he wants to offer relief on that because he's got a lot of things in the mix. I also reached out to the only other place. Bourne is not in a position to sign a contract with us. They may be in 2 or 3 years, but they are not right now. In 2 or 3 years, that might be a solution. I did reach out to Cavanta, and they offered us a 3-year contract for about half the tonnage we were looking for at $90, $95, and $100 a ton. Round numbers, there was some change in there, but I believe you have the term sheet in your packets.
Okay, thank you. Don, did you have?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mine's just more of an esoteric kind of overview. I used to put out contracts in conjunction with the EPA for the federal government to recycle at its own facilities for a number of years. And there's 2 avenues here. I mean, it's kind of arrogant to do what the state is doing, where they're just arbitrarily setting lower and lower goals with no solution about what would pick up the slack. There's absolutely no impetus to create a market with mandatory post-consumer waste, which is something that I faced like 30 years ago. We can collect it, but if there's not a market, what do you do with it? On the other hand, I mean, in a consumer society, which is what we got, it doesn't matter. You just buy the cheap, cool stuff, and then we all get to pay for its disposal, even if Michael insists on buying something that's slathered with more packaging, or somebody else buys stuff that's got a big problem associated with it. There is no total cost of ownership. You buy it, and then all of a sudden, we all pay to dispose of it, which doesn't seem fair, and it doesn't create any kind of impetus. And we've gotten so far afield. I mean, we joked before, but you used to get a Coke bottle, and it went back, and it didn't get ground up to be put in concrete, or it got sanitized and it got reused. The entire model right now is geared towards us all sharing the pain with absolutely no solution. And I saw that the state last week was starting to create more draconian goals for everything, but they don't have a solution about what to do with the rest of the stuff. I know the organic waste is kind of attractive for everybody to attack, except the most draconian part of what they're doing has to do with the commercial people, restaurants, everything. I don't know, what's a hamburger going to cost, like $35 for these people? So we got to rethink how we do stuff at the front end when we're buying it, because this is not sustainable. And if I were China, I would have rejected it. India is becoming a vast wasteland of mercury, and lead, and all the electronics that we built that was real cheap. It's got to go somewhere when it's done. So I'm mystified about why nobody's really worried about this, because we're getting buried in waste.
We have to
Mike?
change our buying habits and try and find buying things that the packaging is recyclable.
Yeah, but there would have to be an incentive. It would have, everything can't be cheap, cool stuff. It has to actually have the cost of ownership factored into it. I don't think we got the guts to do that.
I think you're right.
Michael?
I thank you very much for coming
My
and
pleasure.
spelling this out. As far as the contract goes, we have a whole bunch of memos and presentations in this packet tonight. What we don't have is a contract.
Mhm.
You mentioned a rate a minute ago. I'm looking at a counter offer to something that says it will increase to 75 a ton, but our town administrator is recommending that we pay $82 a ton. So I guess my question to you is, can this wait a week?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
we don't have anything in the packet or even the correct agenda
Okay.
item to vote
All right.
tonight.
Okay.
And I would ask Joe to put all that together, or Chris to put all that together, an actual contract that you
Okay.
guys look at, approve, and sign before you come back to us next week.
Yep.
A
Certainly.
memo from Link explaining what Link's position is on this as the department head.
Mhm.
Carol Coppola, can we make sure that we have the money to pay him? So that our finance director chimes in on this and says, by changing the rate, it means this, and this is where it's coming from. But everything that we're supposed to have, and I certainly recognize the crisis, and if you give us a little bit of time to get our documents in a row and Link's opinion in writing, I would appreciate it.
No worries.
Joe, you
Take
want to
your time.
comment?
And
Well,
this is-
I was going to say, I'm prepared to speak to some of the documents
Right,
when you're ready to proceed to item B.
okay. Well, we'll move to item B. That's what you're referring to as item B.
Sure.
Was the actual contract itself. Because, go ahead, Joe.
Just to walk the board through what's in the packet. So there are really essentially three key documents to reference. The first one is the letter from New Bedford Waste Services dated August 9th, which was received in the office on August 13th. And as you can see there, there's reference to the uncontrollable circumstances, also known as force majeure, section in the contract. The second letter you see is a draft response that was written by John Giorgio at KP Law to be presented and discussed by the board as a response to that, and that is what's evidenced by the memo from the administrator on September 18th. To encapsulate everything, what it really comes down to is the documents you see were a reaction to the force majeure letter in August, a response from council saying that essentially the town's position would be that we reject the force majeure argument, that the uncontrollable circumstances are more in line with what would be considered market circumstances. And that is the draft response in rejecting the argument. And that's the essence of the memo on the 18th. I think for the board's purposes this evening, and if I heard the DPW director correctly earlier, that if both parties agree to an extension of the October 1st deadline, then we can accomplish a lot of what you're looking for, Michael. But I think it would be appropriate, and I would ask the board to use the language under item 9B to at least, if there's a statement made by the vendor in the presence of the board to extend the October 1st deadline, I think that will be helpful.
Yeah. And,
So moved.
well, and that was my understanding. We weren't to the contract phase tonight. We were in a position of basically a counteroffer and continued discussions.
Right.
And so the question is, do we have a motion? Is some way to do that, to continue on? Michael?
I don't think we need a motion based on what Joe just said. If the vendor agrees to the board to extend the date. And really, my questions were based on vote to approve New Bedford Waste Services contract renewal.
Right, and that was a mistake.
Okay.
We didn't look at the
But we don't need to
contract.
make a motion, and we shouldn't make a motion because there's nothing in the agenda to make a motion for us
We need
to
the-
extend anything. We need them to say that they're okay with it, correct?
And we need to, that's correct. And we need to agree to work with that then on what the counteroffer and what we're gonna go forward.
I agree. I think it's just important to have it on the record that the extension of the October 1st deadline is agreed to. I think we've
Now-
accomplished that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I only
Yeah.
have one other question, and it's really to Joe. Joe, by going up the percentage that we're talking about, do we get into any procurement issues that we have to? And will you just spell that out for me or us?
Sure, but generally speaking, this is an exempt process with the procurement laws. That's why Griffin and I didn't get into the specifics of it. That's why you wouldn't see a memo from us.
Thank you.
However, to your earlier point, we would certainly vet it still through the finance director for all those other questions.
Okay.
But it is an exempt procurement, so it's different statutes.
Thank you.
And we actually changed that, so we look at our own policy of, internal policy of removing the exempt procurement part of that, so. It doesn't change much, except it would have you at least look at it, which you're doing
Sure.
anyway. Michael?
So I just want to close by saying thank you to you both for coming tonight and for working with the town of Harwich.
Just want to say thank you for excusing our absence last week, and happy we're here tonight. Thank you.
Well, work with the government to change some of these ridiculous,
I have some serious responses to that master plan because to me, it makes no sense, so they'll be coming out soon.
well, not to get too far afield, but we see a lot of areas, I don't want to get too political, but we see a lot of things going on that wants to get us to a certain endpoint from where we are now with no thought of a transition phase. My soapbox. Michael?
So last on that, if we could just skip back up to A, solid waste presentation. I do think it's appropriate for the town of Harwich to send a letter to our governor, state reps, explaining our position
point.
and the crisis. Maybe town administrator could direct Link to maybe write that letter, but
Well, let me suggest, Mike, you've already, looks like you have all that put together. If you give us something, we can,
That's why I wanted to give you.
we can move
Well,
on.
you can use it, please.
well, and we'd also like to add that maybe we ask Ed McManus to include this in the selectmen councilors' meetings, monthly meetings, so that the entire Cape can get behind something like this.
Mr. Chair, might I recommend that whoever drafts the letter, it would have some gravitas going to the governor if it's either by the chair or the whole board signing it.
Right. We'll do it. Link?
I just wanted Link to write it, because we still haven't got a letter on the tornado yet, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You heard tonight the trials and tribulations of MSW and that the cost is going up. You heard recycling, the cost has gone down. We have a bright spot. There is one. The C&D business is going gangbusters. We have essentially about as many trailers as we can move, we're doing, and that is in some form or another subsidizing the losses. That's why you haven't seen me in front of you saying that the sky is falling. I really need, having capacity is honestly more important than the actual number. I mean, numbers are always important, but when you don't have a place to take your trash, no one likes to think about trash. When we say to the resident, we can't take it at the transfer station because I can't move it, we got a real problem.
Exactly. This is troubling because it's a case where money may not buy a solution.
Yes, sir, that's
Not
exactly.
that many cases I know of where that's true. Don?
Yeah, and just adding to that, it's nice that people who sit in offices write these things and draft them and create by executive fiat stuff, but even what we got from KP Law, that's great. It's a market force. But what's the objective here? To put everybody in the marketplace out of business so that there's another dead-end road where you can't take it there either? It just seems self-defeating because they seem to think that, you know, if we make these rules, somebody will figure out how to deal with them.
Okay.
Well, our first instinct was, let's get the men in the room, let's have a conversation. Let's not get attorneys.
Right.
You hire attorneys, they have billable hours, and
Thank you.
thank you.
And thanks again, miss. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much.
Okay, moving on to old business. This was discussed last week some, and I know I was a little unsure of the direction on that, but this is both support Affordable Housing Trust General Application, Part-Time Housing Coordinator. This is not asking for a vote for us for action. This is a vote to support this going to CPC. So, Don?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Michael had some good points, though. So to the extent I was expecting the town administrator to be here because he's the chair of the trust, but I can handle a little bit of
Okay.
this. just to understand, I did make the point last week that the 50,000 part of this that had to do with the committee.
The coordinator.
Yeah. We had changed from $30,000 for 6 months, and there's actually more work going on for the 1 year. And the larger component of that has to do with the bigger money amount. We have no priority right now. We have no rules of operation. We were supposed to go out on a contract for somebody to actually do that, map out priorities, how you would go after actual building of properties as compared to rehabbing properties and other things. Talking to other people around who have trusts, we're already about a year behind, so that's supposed to be allocated to both filling up the war chest to be able to start something physically and also go out for a contract that has somebody's set up the priorities and rules of operation, which we currently don't have.
Don, Michael, you have some more?
I don't have any more questions. It's really the same questions, Don. I'm really looking for a vote of the Affordable Housing Trust to come back to us and have a document. I was really hoping to have a scope of work that they were gonna do. Where that scope of work was a duplicate to other towns to see how much work we're being billed for versus what they're doing for other towns. The 500,000 from CPC into the Affordable Housing Trust, I would certainly support because that's what we're aiming for. But I don't have any more than I had last week, other than what Don just said, which he said last week. Certainly something that I probably will support, but I really need to see.
Well, I think we're running out of time on this, and since this is asking for CPA funds from CPC, I would encourage moving forward.
We're not running out of time because we're only being asked to support it because they're going to put it forward anyway.
Right, but there's.
So all they're really looking for is our support on this article. This is not the Selectmen's article.
Right.
In support of what Michael's saying, the application is going to go in accordance with the deadline for the CPC.
Right.
If they want some backup to us, I don't see any harm, because we haven't had trust meetings since the last discussion happened, and I am here speaking just as a member of the trust. There hasn't been.
I'm comfortable with that. If you want to go back to the trust and bring us documentation, I don't want to hold this up and jeopardize the funding for this position, especially since it's coming from. And I presume, as I remember CPC action, they'll ask the same questions before they would okay it. So it should be in their application anyway, CPC is my point.
We voted to send the application forward. That much we did do in a public session. It was never on the agenda.
So I think our request is to, when you format that to go to CPC, if you could bring that back to us so we can look at it to verify our support.
The chair generally sets the agenda, so I'm hoping that he will have that on it.
Okay. Michael?
And really, Don, all I'm looking for, just so we're clear, is I'm looking for an outline of the coordinator and what the extra 20,000 is for, and a breakdown.
Okay.
And the support of that by your committee.
We'll bring this back after you've taken action then. B is vote support of Deacon's Folly. Is this acquisition for affordable housing and open space conservation? Joe, I'm not sure who's going to lead this.
Sorry, I was taking my notes about the follow-ups, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
You're looking at the second item, the Deacon's Folly.
Deacon's Folly. I noticed that was their top priority last time, so. Michael?
This is, again, something that's been put back on the agenda, and I don't see us going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere with it until I see the appraisal, which I know we've already gone out for an appraisal on this. I would say that the owner of this property has taken the time to present it to planning. And I think if he gets approved with planning, these lots suddenly become more expensive to the town of Harwich. I shared my concerns in a meeting on the location of the project and whether or not it was suitable for affordable housing or not suitable for affordable housing. I still have that same concern. And 7 lots with 7 homes on it at probably $600,000+ apiece, to me, is not a terrible thing on the tax roll, given the report that we were given earlier tonight. So I'm going to be very critical, I think, of the appraisal and what that does to the value of the open land. But if you ask for a vote tonight, it will fail because I am voting no.
Joe, do you happen to know the status of the appraisal?
Not to my knowledge, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I will follow up with staff in the morning.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm on the Housing Trust, and I'm also the liaison for real estate and open space. It's not a leap for me to say this. There have been discussions where I'll differ with my colleague here that I think, again, affordable housing gets built and then people get bus routes afterwards. They don't put a bus route into an empty lot. What's concerning to all of us, and this was an exciting collaboration between the Harwich Conservation Trust and the town, was we were going to get both. And should the subdivision plan get approved, and should one of the lots that's created by that wind up being flipped and sold and built on, this all goes up in smoke, because you're bifurcating the properties. I tend to differ too with this, the tax stuff. If you were building something industrial, yeah, I'm all in. But housing in general only ever creates about 88% of what it takes in services. So it's a dog chasing its tail for us to think we're going to build more residences and build our way out of property tax problems.
In the presentation I think we heard last week, this was attractive to me because it combined affordable housing with conservation. I think this had some mutual attractive with Conservation Trust, Harwich Conservation Trust, for instance. Well, you care to make a motion then, Don, if you want to wait?
I'd like to move that we support it, the application for Deacon's Folly Road acquisition, the project amount requested of whatever the appraisal is.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay.
I'm gonna tell you up front, it's gonna fail because I'm gonna vote no. If you wait a week or 2 weeks, you're gonna have other board members that may be convinced or may not be convinced. But if we go to vote, it fails tonight.
Why is that so? We have a 2-to-1 vote.
Quorum of the Board of Selectmen is 5, correct, Joe? It's not
Yeah,
the
but it's
quorum of the,
well,
it's not the
members
quorum of
present.
the presence.
So
Right,
quorum
but
is-
It's a vote of members
Right,
present.
under the open
Those are
meeting
members
laws,
present.
members voted, present and voting.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
If it would make you feel happier to wait, I'll
Oh, no,
wait.
don't wait. Vote away.
Okay. Again, this is support, so we still have room to discuss as we go
Yep.
forward. But
Yep.
okay, we've had discussion. All in favor?
Yep, Elaine.
Elaine? Sure, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Elaine Shufflin, Real Estate and Open Space Committee. I just want to clarify one thing. Technically, Harwich Conservation Trust is not actively involved in this. Although they brought us the information, they're not part of this. They support it, but they're not actively working with us on this application. They're just supporting it.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Elaine. Any other discussion, anyone? Take a vote. It's you and I, right? So I'm going to vote yes.
Aye.
No.
No. So 2-to-1. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would just advise the members that have voted that in your signature package this evening, there is a section for initials, if that's the way the board wants to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on then to town administrators' reports. Joe,
Yep.
we'll leave this to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to present notes on behalf of the administrator, and then I just have one note of my own. First, with regard to the insurance renewal proposal for the South Harwich Meeting House. The update on that is we had received, when I say we, I mean administration, have received information from our insurance agent, carrier, and strategist, Maya, several weeks ago. They were looking to renew coverage on that building and property. I wasn't clear as to whether that was something that would go through me or the board. However, in the meantime, the administrator has confirmed with Maya and has signed their request for coverage approvals.
How much was it for?
I can get that to the board at a later date.
Okay.
Next item on the Lothrop matter, where we stand now is that the engineer will have to go out, town engineer will have to go out to establish the boundary lines before the chain link fence would be installed.
And what's Griffin's timing on that?
Well, he's at 110% capacity,
right.
so he's aware of it. I don't want to speak for him, other than I know he's doing the best he can as fast as he can. And he's aware of this matter and the urgency of it for the board. Barnstable Weights and Measures Program update. Long story short, we have material that was presented by Town of Barnstable and Barnstable County on the Weights and Measures Program, which is changing. It's going to have an impact on towns up and down the Cape, and there'll be more information coming shortly once we digest everything they've presented to us. On the Cape Cod Blue Economy Foundation, the administrator indicated that he is applying for, or we would be applying for a grant to establish an information kiosk down at the Saguatucket Harbor Complex. Cape Cod Blue Economy Foundation, as you may know, is set up to establish and support all of the economy centered around shellfishing, ocean, and any industries that are related to oceans and water.
Joe, can I just,
Sure.
excuse me, interrupt you? And so, the purpose of the kiosk will be to, what? I mean, what are we trying to?
I don't have much more
is it
information. other than-
educational, or is
yeah.
it?
I honestly have nothing more than information kiosk at the harbor. I can certainly track that down and get the board more information.
I'd be interested in what their objective is on the kiosk. Is
Sure.
it educational? Is it pointing out all our fine restaurants in town, or is it, just?
Understood. Pet burial ground update. I believe the DPW director informed the administrator that the gazebo has been moved from that location to the appropriate location according to Cemetery Commission. We would just need to finalize the dollar amount that was mentioned before for that transfer. And at this point, really, it's going to be the discussion as to whether or not it's the board's preference to do a sale of surplus land, which I can tell you at a later date, once I've fully educated myself of all the requirements under Chapter 30B for a sale of surplus land.
There are 2 points that's come up on this, is I think, one is with town meeting vote, my understanding is that the land was transferred back to the Board of Selectmen. And so the question was that truly a fact? And I think we're trying to check out with KP Law, be sure that happened. The next item, if that's true, and I believe it is, and then I think what we need to do is bring back as an agenda item what we want to do with that. We have to, do we want to put out an RFP to have something, or transfer it to another town department? There's some options for us, but that needs to be a discussion. So it's really a two-step. First is a question. The second one is the procurement law is on disposal, basically, that we have to bring back. So we'll bring that back.
Might I recommend, while we have 2 members of the Real Estate and Open Space Committee here, that they don't have to wait for that. They can actually start looking at potential uses, parallel to whatever actions we're taking, so that they could give us their studied report.
And I think they already have had some discussion on that, but it's a good point. Okay, Joe, sorry for that.
No, it's quite all right, Mr. Chairman. And the last thing I have would just be, as the Assistant Town Administrator and half of your procurement team, to give a very brief update on procurement, just to say that we have at least 27 projects that have been presented to us in some form or another. We have actively engaged at least 13 of them, including 3 of them that are out for bids or quotes. One of the biggest ones that will be coming before the board, hopefully in early November, based on our scheduling, is the catch basin redesign project throughout town. That's utilizing the amount of Chapter 90 money that we have. Significant effort to bring that together. But what I would like to be able to do going forward, and get more direction from the administrator and the board on, is I think it might be helpful for Griffin and I to present to you folks on a regular basis what we're working on for procurement, to give you a sense of how much work is out there, how much work needs to be done, and what's on the horizon. I understand the frustrations and concerns of many of the department heads that we work with. An example I can give you is that one of the items that we talked about is a fiscal year 2019 CPC project regarding Brooks Park lighting. That's an involved project. We're trying to get that done. Balance that off of department heads and other procurement proponents, if you will, of trying to fast-track fiscal year 20. And so Griffin and I are trying to prioritize as much as we can, but I think at some point we'd have to come before either the administrator or the board for further help in prioritizing.
Thank you, Joe. I realized last week that we'd have dug we've dug a hole and fallen behind in procurement of getting projects done that's been authorized by last town meeting. So I appreciate that, Joe, because my response to that is that and then I would like to come back to the board. We have a hole, we need to work our way out of it, and so we should prioritize what that is. You know, Brooks Lighting comes in one idea, because we need to get that done this winter, because before baseball starts.
Right.
But I appreciate that, Joe, and you and Griffin can work on it. Come back with us what the list is, and I think that should be an open debate from the board of our priorities, what you have. So we need to start just getting it done,
Absolutely.
and that will help us maybe. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While we're back on that subject again, I just want to make sure, have you had the opportunity to talk directly to the town administrator about the ramifications of our vote pertaining to signature authority? Because I'm real happy with where we are, because it's real clear to me that we had a hell of a lot of money that was changing hands without us actually seeing any documents at all. But the way that vote went is really simple. If it's more than $25,000, it doesn't matter if it's an exempt contract, doesn't matter if it's change order, it doesn't matter if it's an insurance policy. We need to see it so that we can agree to it.
I can remind him, but that's a pretty clear vote we had, so. Anything else, Joe?
That was it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Selection report, Michael?
I was just going to add one thing to the procurement list. Joe, and I can agenda this through Larry if you want,
Yeah.
but Traffic Safety Committee has done a study on, or a quick study on Freeman and 28, where Snow Inn Road comes out. They've asked for a engineered road layout, south and west. The only person that can get that from the state is Griffin Ryder. So they need that to move forward with what they're doing for traffic safety. If you want, Larry, I would be happy to send you an email and get that on the agenda, but there was another bad accident there this weekend.
Yeah, I read that in the paper. If you can send that to me, let me see whether that needs to be on the agenda, or we can just, they can do it.
Absolutely.
Okay?
I have nothing else.
Thank you.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I do have three things. I was at the, Thursday was at the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund Management Board. Functional thing. I mean, they voted to extend the Bylaws Committee into writing and establishing the regulations that govern the entire thing. So since I'm on that part of the board.
I'd like an update, because that's an important
It is.
discussion.
I did have one thing I wanted to update from that discussion. Again, they have roundtable discussion. They go around and they talk about things. It is abundantly clear, listening to Barnstable and Yarmouth at that meeting, that Barnstable is doing a cost recovery for any one of three elements or in combination of them, including in full negotiations with Barnstable, in discussions with DHY, and in going on its own. Dennis is also thinking of its alternatives at this point too. So even if we decide that this thing is DHY is the neatest thing since buttered toast, we probably would like to create a model where that, because we have two other possibilities. The only thing I've ever heard from David Young is well, compared to us building it ourselves, but we also have the potential for Chatham. So, I mean, I would love to be able to parallel plans so that we're not the only ones left in the lurch if something happens with the other two towns, or even one of them, because it doesn't work if there's only two of us. So, enough said about that. I had the pleasure of being at Cornelius Pond for the ribbon cutting with Selectman McManus. It's really terrific when we get to protect property there. And that leads into the third thing, that in the spirit of that, Mr. McManus must have been carried away with that because he's in New York, and I saw him post today. Then he went to the Museum of Natural History. So that ends my report.
Okay, and I have nothing more, so
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all approved.
Yes.
That's good.